Hello, we're here with Garrard Conley, the writer of Boy Erased, a memoir which has just been produced as a film about controversial practice and pseudoscience that is conversion therapy. This is a collaboration with NBC News Think and NBC Out. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I wanted to just talk to you about how prevalent it is, because it's a practice that is trying to convert LGBTQ people to cisgender or heterosexual people. Does it work, and how much of the country practices it?
Yeah, it definitely doesn't work. Spoiler alert, I'm still very gay. But that's not to say they didn't try really hard. There are about, right now, I believe 77,000 people involved in conversion therapy in the US alone. 700,000 to 800,000 people have been in conversion therapy throughout, its existence. It actually started in like 1950s and 1960s with the Eisenhower administration when they were sending people in the administration to St. Elizabeth's Hospital outside of Washington, D.C. to be cured. And they would often use like lobotomies or electroshock therapy. Those are the things you might usually associate with conversion therapy, but now it's all mostly psychological torture.
So when it's psychological torture, if I may ask you a couple of details, because you do see it in your film, Boy Erased, what do they make you say? What do they make you do?
They make you do this thing called a moral inventory, which is like a list of, or an account of basically every sexual experience or thought you've ever had. And when I was there, it was the first time I was ever talking about any of this stuff openly. We were shamed. We had to strip our language of anything that could be joyful or exciting about sex. And then people would tell us that it was wrong, that God wouldn't love us if we acted on these feelings. And we were given a bunch of Bible verses to cure us. So that was one. They were also using a model of like Alcoholics Anonymous's 12-step program. And this was at my specific facility that I was at. There were, each one has like a different thing that it does. And so we were taught that homosexuality or even being trans was an addiction, which is extremely harmful, for anyone that's hearing this message. Because we were told that we could change it, that we could just sort of go cold turkey and be cured in some way.
So when you say they each have their own sort of process, is there a nationalized system? Is there cohesion between these centers?
You know why there's not? It's because there's no degree that can grant you the ability to administer conversion therapy, because the American Psychological Association declassified homosexuality as a mental illness in 1973. So ever since 1973, like no major medical or psychological association has ever claimed that this kind of practice could work. And in fact, they've done many studies that show that it's very harmful.
Even considered torture.
Yeah. And, it's impossible to track down these numbers, but a lot of people have committed suicide from conversion therapy. When John Smid, who ran Love in Action, where I went, apologized for ever having administered conversion therapy and is now married to a man, when he gave that apology on his website, one of the first responses was a list of names of people who'd committed suicide who went to Love in Action.
Wow. And when you were there, you met someone who eventually killed himself after going through Love in Action.
Well, so the film dramatizes it a little bit differently. There were people that we knew who committed suicide, but that particular character was, a little bit dramatized. It wasn't the same guy. Actually, the guy who ended up having the fake funeral and baptism came to the New York premiere. He's still alive.
Okay.
So he's not the same person who committed suicide. But yeah, there were definitely, like, you heard about it all the time. There was a man while I was there who I call T in my book, so I don't give away his identity. He would almost every morning admit to having at least tried to commit suicide or dreamt of committing suicide or planned it out. And John Smid, who was our head counselor, would say, "This is wrong, you can't think this way." And instead of really helping him through those thoughts, he would just sort of shame him, which, if you're thinking of suicide, being told that it's wrong to think of suicide and being shamed for it is not the best way to solve that.
Well, it also seems like shame is really the only weapon they have in their repertoire.
Yeah, because none of the other weapons work. Because the Bible, there are 6 what we call clobber passages that talk about homosexuality, but all of those, given the context, don't really say that homosexuality is wrong. I mean, if you look in Leviticus where it says, "Thou shalt not lie with man as with woman," that's right next to a Bible verse that talks about not eating shrimp and not wearing clothes that are mixed fabrics.
Right.
Given equal weight, right?
We're doing a little bit too much for Leviticus today.
Leviticus hates us right now. Let's get some shrimp in here.
Oh, goodness.
Shrimp cocktail at 10 a.m.
Now that you're bringing up the Bible, I do want to ask you about your relationship with Christianity. You grew up in the church. How do you hang on to your faith if you still do?
For a while, I lost all faith. I think one of the worst things that conversion therapy does to someone is it in many cases completely halts your experience of faith and God. I know that I would have naturally evolved into someone who believed in a God that was more loving and more open, and I think I would have stayed a Christian, if I'd been allowed to. Instead, God was used as a weapon against me, and I didn't want anything to do with it. So, for like 10 years, I just didn't set foot in a church because it was triggering to even enter a space like that and think about what people were thinking of me. Or, I would even go to like affirming churches that allowed LGBTQ people to be there.
Like Episcopal churches.
Yeah, and it just didn't feel right. So now I don't really go to churches, but I do have faith, and I have a very personal relationship with God. I don't know what God looks like, whether it's a she, he, they. I hope it's a they.
I do too.
Yeah, right? It seems right. But, I think that when I pray now, I pray because I'm grateful for something, because I think the world is often a really scary place, especially if you've been through some really dark stuff. But it's important, I think, to say aloud or repeat what you're grateful for. It helps me remember.
Do you still read your Bible?
Yeah, I do. I read a lot of different translations. When I was growing up, we were only allowed to read the King James Version, which is it actually is very beautiful, wonderful language.
So the Trump administration, there's a possibility that was it the Department of Health and Human Services?
I think so, yeah.
Would classify gender based on genitalia, and if they are ambiguous, potentally doing a DNA test and checking out what people's chromosomes are, and that even that can be inconsistent for people who are intersex. So that being said, what are your thoughts on proposed legislation or policy that would classify just male, female based on genitals or chromosomal matches?
Well, I think it's extremely harmful. I think it's erasing trans lives in many ways and limiting them. Conversion therapy for trans people is very, very dangerous. I mean, it was dangerous for me too, but when you conflate gender and sexuality in the way that a lot of these places do, it can result in really horrible body image issues and ideas about the self that are incompatible with who you are. So trans people are 2 to 3 times as likely to enter conversion therapy as a cis gay man, and that's something that I don't think a lot of people know. It's something that I think is extremely important. And while we're talking about this, I think it's essential that we protect the people who are most vulnerable to this kind of therapy. If you can remember Layla Alcorn, she was trans and she committed suicide and left a note saying that she just wanted people to know who she was.
She was 17.
Yeah, it's I think it was a big moment in the history of conversion therapy and awareness. It became a big headline, and people suddenly understood that this was happening to people. So I think we should remember her, and we should remember what we're fighting for to protect everyone, not just a few people.
Are there any bills that you know of or any state lawmakers right now working to ban conversion therapy?
Yeah, there are quite a few people who are working to ban conversion therapy. Unfortunately, it's failed a few times in the same states that are trying to do it over and over again. I think Virginia has tried many times and failed. Evan Lowe in California, he's a politician who attempted to get a ban on conversion therapy based off of the fact that it's fraud. And then that bill was pulled for various political reasons. That's where I hope we eventually get, because if we can prove that conversion therapy is fraud, then it cannot be peddled at all. I mean, it can still be protected under religious organizations that want to do it, but they can't charge for it. And that's a big deal, because if you can't charge for it, then you can't really make money off of this industry. So we're hoping, I personally am hoping that a ban of that sort eventually comes down the line. The problem is the courts are not in our favor. So if we were to have a ban like that, it's possible that it could reverse a lot of the progress we've made so far.
Are you hopeful?
Yeah, I'm hopeful despite the fact that every day's headlines are terrifying to me. I think I'm hopeful most of all because with the film and with just like going around and talking to a lot of different people in the country, I've seen so many people working now for the first time on ending conversion therapy. I mean, almost every major LGBTQ group right now is aligned with my message and with messages of other people who are doing this work to end conversion therapy, and it's totally awesome. I mean, I've never seen this kind of support, so I'm hoping that we can end it.
Have you seen a massive increase of support after the movie came out, or even after your book?
I do know that the Trevor Project, which works with LGBTQ youth, has received like 4 times as many phone calls, many of them in opposition to the Trevor Project. But as Sam Britton, who works for them, said, this is a good sign. They're listening. People are getting mad. They're listening. We're becoming a mainstream topic, which means that we can play it out. And parents who are considering sending their kids to something like this will at least know of it. My mom and dad, they didn't know anything about conversion therapy. They just listened to their church leaders. Now, if you Google it, you're going to see my book, or you're going to see the movie, or something associated with that, and it's not going to be positive. And that's a big deal. At least it might get someone thinking, maybe this isn't the best thing, or maybe I should look into it.
There's just people operating centers that don't have MDs, or they're not psychologists?
There are like a few licensed psychologists, I think, that are pro-conversion therapy. And most people don't have the right degree to be doing this kind of therapy. But a lot of people are hiding under religious liberty. So they're just saying, well, I don't have to have a degree because I'm a religious organization. And I understand, the film and the book are not against religion. We're not against, any faith. We're against the idea that human rights or human identity can be debated. It can't be. It's not up for debate. We're not objects. We're not problems. I hear that all the time, especially right now when we're talking about trans issues, like, oh, the problem, or they'll say like, it's like a social issue. Like, how is it a social issue how are we an issue? Like, we just exist. So that's what I want to get everyone to, like, just to understand that this can't be debated. The other important thing for me is just that people realize that conversion therapy can take many different forms. The movie and the book, they're an extreme form. It's a facility where, it can often seem absurd that people are doing this. But conversion therapy can be a bad coming out experience where parents say you have to change who you are, or they have a negative reaction. Conversion therapy can take the form of a priest sitting across from you, or a pastor sitting across from you and telling you, no, you need to repress who you are. I know a lot of people in certain religions who say, I was told, I know you can't change who you are, but you can't act on it. So there's a lot of different forms in which this can take, and I think that hopefully we can begin to talk about how these aren't things up for debate anymore. We're who we are, we're here, we're queer.
There's nothing you can do about it.
You can't do anything about it. We're done, we're here, it's over.
Well, thank you again for your time. This is In Conversation, a collaboration with NBC News Think and NBC Out. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.